We are going to talk about taxes today. And, you know, I always, when we pick a concept, right, I always start by going and just looking up, getting some definitions. And even with things that seem obvious, right? Why do I need to look up taxes? But I actually made some interesting discoveries when I looked up the word. So first of all, the simple definition for a tax is a compulsory contribution to state and or federal revenue levied by the government on workers' income and business profits, right? Or added to the cost of some goods, services, and transactions. Okay, so we know that, but the parts of that definition that I think are really important for this conversation is that it is a compulsory contribution, right? It's something that we have no choice, we have no say. If you live and work in the United States, there is a compulsory tax that is levied on your income or your business profits, and it's a contribution to the state and federal revenue, okay? But interestingly, and I think, again, we know this, but probably haven't thought about it in a little while, the other definition for tax, right, is this: a strain or heavy demand, a burden, load, weight, encumbrance, demand, strain, pressure, stress, drain, and imposition, right? And I actually found that to be funny, not so funny, because we don't necessarily remember that that is also the definition of the word. If someone feels taxed, they feel this heavy burden. And so when you look at these words, burden, load, weight, encumbrance, demand, strain, pressure, stress, drain, imposition, those are a lot of the descriptors that many of us are feeling as we approach tax season. And so in the letter that I sent out on Monday, I asked you, how do you feel about tax time, right? And the reason that I asked that is because it occurred to me in the last couple of months, it just occurred to me how much, as I meet with clients at the start of the year, and there's really just this recurring energy around tax time, right? And it occurred to me how much we have all simply accepted that. We've accepted that this is a time of year that just sucks, right? I would be thrilled if there is anyone who will share with us today that maybe you've already had some breakthroughs in this area. But for many of us, we've just kind of accepted that every year, for the first few months of the year, we have to deal with this burden, right? And so what I suggested in the newsletter that went out on Monday is I asked, what if we considered viewing tax day, so viewing April 15th, as the anniversary of our money relationship, right? What would it have to look like if we were willing to actually change the way we're approaching that day and making it, like, can we even see the possibility where we could celebrate tax time? Now, I want you guys to know that this isn't something that, like, I feel like, oh yes, because I celebrate tax time every year. Definitely not, right? Now, I do feel that tax time for me today is significantly different than tax time was for me years ago, right? I definitely don't feel that I go into the same pain cycle, and we're going to talk about that I used to. But it's certainly not anything that I would see as a time worth celebrating. But what if it was, right? It's a set date, April 15th. We know it. It doesn't change every year. So it really is similar to the other things that we celebrate. We celebrate our birthdays. We celebrate our anniversaries. We celebrate all kinds of things, right? The birthdays of the people that we love, the anniversaries of the people that we love. And yet here is this date that happens every single year that we look at as painful, right? Even though it happens every single year. So where would we begin? Where would we begin if we agreed that, yes, that is actually something that would be pretty exciting? If we, everybody on this call, right, if we all started to look at tax time as a time of celebration. All right, so it starts with the idea. So it starts with the idea that this is something that is actually possible. Because everything ultimately starts just with the idea. So you guys, if you've been around me or these calls for any length of time, you know that I call on the words of Viktor Frankl a lot. He is such, his writings, his words, such a powerful example of inner freedom, right? He is someone who has left us with just so much proof about what is within our control, right? Which is the way that we react to things, the way that we respond to things. And so, again, I just want to share with you 3 of my favorite quotes from Viktor Frankl, because I think that they are specifically applicable to this conversation, okay? So he says, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. He says, this is one that I've used a lot, everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Okay? So these are basically, he's saying the same thing, right? The last freedom that we have is the freedom to choose our attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose our own way. And then the last one, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom, right? In our response lies our growth and our freedom, okay? So why these particular quotes? Because when it comes to our taxes, right, when it comes to tax time, do you see instantly how these quotes apply? And when we take tax time and we say, could we decide to view tax time as a celebration? That would be our choice, right, to respond to it in that way. So tax time, we don't have a choice, right? So when he says, when we're no longer able to change a situation, there is no way for us to change the fact that every single year, April 15th, our taxes will be due, that every single year we have to spend this time preparing and getting ready to file our taxes. So that is something that is out of our control. And it's a really, over these months, we've talked a lot about the difference between what is within our control and what is not within our control. And here's an extremely clear example. Taxes not within our control. So what is within our control? Our response to it, right? And so when he says, in our response lies our growth and freedom, doesn't that perfectly summarize what we're all working towards, right? We, all of us who are, on this call, all of us have chosen, we have committed to being abundance bound, right? We are bound for abundance. And we know that a big part of that is actually recognizing and acknowledging that we have a relationship with money, right? We have a relationship with money that isn't a relationship we can choose. No, I'm not going to have it, right? We all have the relationship. And so like any relationship that we have, the relationship is either going to be unhealthy or it's going to be healthy, right? And you guys have heard me say this a bunch of times, but for a relationship to be healthy, it takes certain work, right? It takes certain levels of commitment. And so if we are all abundance bound, we're committed to the healthy relationship, isn't it odd, guys, that we allow there to be this time of year that time after time and year after year after year, we allow it to be this painful, negative aspect, right? So just take any relationship in your life that you value, that you want to be healthy, and ask yourself, if there was this time of year every single year that caused pain and stress and fear and anxiety, wouldn't you do something about it, right? So what I'm suggesting is that we actively start bringing consciousness to the fact that this relationship that we're all committed to, there tends to be a time of year when the relationship goes south, right? And now that we've got that awareness, I want us to look at what we can do to actively shift it, okay? So I'm going to throw out the challenge that from this point forward, so not this tax time necessarily. I mean, I think we depending on where you are, you can try and have this last week be as powerful as possible. But what we're going to do is we're going to use this tax time to bring us all of the clarity that we need so that all of our future tax times are celebrations, right? That all of our future tax times are the anniversary, right, of our financial relationship. And it's a time that we actually, all of us, honor and celebrate our commitment and work on this relationship that we treasure and value, okay? So, how do we do that in a practical way? Now, first, I'm going to play a little bit, and I'm just going to ask you guys, like in the Q&A or in the chat, are you in, right? Are you willing to I know I have to make it practical for us, but are you willing to have a conversation about making tax time a celebration, right? I know it may sound crazy, but are we willing to accept the challenge that from this point forward, tax time will be our financial relationship anniversary. So let's see, because I want to try and make these calls more active. Can I hear a little, yes, Elena accepts. Thank you, Elena. Who else? Anyone else willing to accept the challenge? I'm going to give you guys a second. Cool. Angela is willing, right? I know it sounds crazy, guys, but it starts with being willing, right? Thank you, Beth. Beth says, okay. I know you're typing, but that's how we feel sometimes. All right. Yeah, maybe. I'll try it. Okay. So perfect. Perfect. Yes. Thank you. A big yes with some exclamation points. All right. So how do we do it, guys, right? How do we make this just not, oh, it's a great idea, Miata, but come on, let's get real. All right. So I think that it's important here to remember, I know some of you may be new to us, but it's important to remember, right, that when it comes to our money, really when it comes to everything in our lives, but when it comes to our money, right, we all tend to operate in one of two cycles. We tend to operate in a pain cycle or a power cycle, right? And that is definitely true when we look at tax time. Now, what is the pain cycle? What defines the pain cycle is that we are being driven by emotion, right? That's what defines the pain cycle. What moves us into the power cycle? Clarity and reason, right? So your emotions can still be there. They're going to still be there because we're human, right? But what moves us into the power cycle is when we refuse to allow our emotions to drive, okay? So what I feel is that when we make the declaration that we are going to start looking at tax time as the anniversary of our healthy and thriving money relationship, right? In order to do that, we have to get into the power cycle around tax time versus the pain cycle, okay? And so I'm going to keep talking, but what I'd like you to do is to think for a second about what emotions have perhaps been driving you during tax time. And please go ahead and type these, type them in the chat, type them in the Q&A. What emotions have driven during tax time, okay? Because the first part of clarity of moving into the power cycle is getting clear that we're in a pain cycle, right? Actually getting conscious about what that looks like. And so Beth is saying that she has a routine around tax time and that actually that part is okay. But the problem for her is when the bill comes, right? And so what's super interesting about that, right, Beth, is that the problem for you is when the bill comes, but I'm assuming that basically the bill comes every year. And also that even though you say the process is okay, well, the process is what now for you leads to the bill. So you've maybe got the work down, right? It's like, yeah, this is what I have to do, and I gather my papers, but at the end of the day, what am I going to owe? And the problem is the fear and the anxiety around owing, right? Yes, people are saying fear, stress, dread, high anxiety. And yes, so when we have partners, someone has shared that you take on your husband's anxiety and you feel you have to take care of him as well. So that's also, right? Once we're in partnerships and once we're in families, it can become a pain cycle for everybody, right? I suspect that because my children are older, and so I suspect that they have some memories of periods when I definitely went into the pain cycle around tax time, right? And I'm sure they were aware of that because of my mood and the emotions that were driving in every area, right? Okay, so what I am going to ask you guys to do, because right now it's really so present for you, is I'm going to ask you after this call, hopefully sometime over the course of this weekend, to do a little bit of journaling, right, around what has this tax season been like for you. And get really present, try and get down on paper where the pain cycle showed up for you, if it did, right? And so really journaling for a bit on, you take on your husband's anxiety, you take on the anxiety of the people around you, and then you're not just dealing with your own stress, but you're feeling like you have to take care of other people. Or was it that you waited until the very last minute to try to get a tax appointment, and now you feel anger that you're not able to get a tax appointment, or perhaps that you're paying more because it's so close to the deadline to get that tax appointment? Do you feel anxious because you're having to gather together a ton of paperwork that you didn't have organized, and you don't have clarity around your numbers, you don't have clarity around how much you've spent, you don't have clarity around how much you've earned? Do you not have clarity around how much taxes you paid already, right? So not knowing whether you paid enough or too much or not enough. Do you know when you go, did you know going into this tax time how much you expected to owe? Or were you unclear and therefore fearful about all of that? And I'm just scrolling through to see if there are any other thoughts. Okay, so I'm asking you to journal about that, right? Yes, because right now, hopefully it's pretty present for you, but also because in order for us to move to the power cycle, we want to bring absolute awareness to how has this been showing up for us up until now, right? Because then that's how we can decide how we want it to show up for us in the future, okay? So once you've written, and it can be just, you can do it in lists, you can do it in paragraph form, whatever feels most comfortable for you. Once you've written what this tax time was like for you, or what previous tax times have been like for you, now I'm going to ask you to vision, all right, what would tax time look like for you if it were a celebration, right? What would it look like if you were honoring and celebrating the way that you have shown up to your financial relationship, right? What if you used it as a time to honor all of the work that you've done, all of the money that you've earned, right? All of the ways that you have chosen to spend your money over the year, right? And you really, I know this can feel strange and weird, but you looked at your tax contribution as being your contribution to the good of our society, to the betterment of your state, to the betterment of the country. And, I'm not going to get into politics here, but what I know that, again, that's another place that we can go into the pain cycle because of our feelings of what might be being done with the money. But again, what are we focused on? We are focused on what is actually within our control, which is our response to any given situation, okay? So Now you have essentially two pictures. You have a picture of what tax time has looked like for you in the past, and you have a vision of what you intend tax time to be in the future, right? And guys, if you were planning a big birthday or you were planning a special anniversary, you would really put time into what you wanted the celebration to look like, right? My husband and I renewed our vows at 20 years a couple of years ago, and we put real time into planning that day and who we wanted to be there. And I'm not saying, although you could, right? I'm not saying that you're going to have a big party, but I am saying I want you to give it the same honor and care. How will you celebrate? Okay, so you have those two pictures. And now this is where the practical comes in, right? Because now that we've gotten clear on what we would like tax time to look like, right? Now it becomes, and guys, whenever we've done vision and goal work, it becomes about the concrete steps that you need to put into action right away, now, right? That will allow you to truly celebrate, right, the work that you've done. Because in order to celebrate the work that you've done, we need to actually show up for that work. So I want to point you, and you can jot some of these things down. I want to point you to some of the areas where emotion may be driving you right now and where we will want to bring clarity, because that clarity is going to require some very specific behavior. So the first question that all of us will want to be able to easily answer, right? At the end of next year, you will want to be able to easily answer how much money you have earned, right? And you will want to be able to easily answer how much money you have spent. And so you guys know that this is a really huge thing for me, but I believe that one of the most important things that you will do for your financial well-being is you will start tracking. You will start tracking using, at sort of the highest level, software, right? At the lowest level, pen and paper. You are committing to being someone who tracks every penny that goes out of your household and every penny that comes in to your household, and exactly how that money comes in and exactly how that money goes out, right? So in order for you to be ready to celebrate this time next year, you will need to set up that tracking system if you haven't already right now, okay? But there are more nuances to the tracking system, because Beth shared so honestly that she has a routine and that part is okay. But she says the problem is when the bill comes. Okay, so that means we need additional clarity along throughout the year. We need additional clarity around how much have we or are we paying in taxes throughout the year, right? And we also need to have clarity about what tax bracket do you actually expect to fall into, right? So all of us, guys, if you haven't already, I'm going to ask you after this call to Google 2019 tax brackets, right? So that you can see what percentage of your income will you expect to pay in taxes, right? If you work with an accountant or you work with a CPA or a tax preparer, that's a question that they can really easily answer for you, right? So Beth is asking, is it adjusted gross? So yes, right? And I know that some of these may be terms that you're not familiar with and you're going to need to familiarize yourself with, right, guys? But when you look at the tax brackets, those tax brackets are going to be based on your adjusted gross income, okay? But even if you're like a little fuzzy about what exactly your adjusted gross income, I keep saying growth, your adjusted gross income is going to be, most of us, if we have clarity around how much money has been coming in, we can get really close in the ballpark of what percentage in taxes we're going to be expected to pay, right? And so what this also requires of us is two things. If we are earning with our taxes being taken out, right, guys? So if you are earning on a W-2, you're earning as an employee where the taxes are already taken out for you, your job is to actually verify with every check that comes in that sufficient taxes are being taken out for you, okay? Because some of us, when we fill out that W-4, right? So if you're being paid on a W-2, your employer had you fill out a W-4, right? And you had to claim a number. You claimed 0, or you claimed 1 or 2 or 3. And that number affects how much taxes are being withheld, right? But again, where are we responsible? We're responsible to look at your check throughout the year, to look at your pay stubs, and to make sure that the amount you've paid in taxes thus far, when you look at the amount that you've earned, you want to make sure that the percentage, that the amount you've paid in taxes so far lines up with the amount that you've earned and the percent bracket that you expect to fall in, right? So that if it shows up as being really low, oh my goodness, they've only been taking 12%, and I expect to be in the 22% tax bracket, you need to adjust that so that you don't owe money at the end of the year. For those of us who are paid on 1099, right, which means taxes are not taken out, or we're paid into corporations, which means taxes are not taken out, we have to actually be setting aside that percentage throughout the year, right? So this is where the practical work comes in. One of the things that I do, because I am largely, not 100%, but I'm largely paid as a corporation, is that I have set up a tax account. And every bit of money that comes in, I automatically, right, take 25% off of it and I transfer it into the tax account. So I have to act like the employer, right? Because I really am my own employer, and I have to immediately siphon that money off because that money isn't mine, right? I know that that money has to go to taxes. So this is one of the practices that the actual practical practices that I'm asking you as you look at the difference between what your tax experience is right now versus what you're committing to have your tax experience be. I'm asking you, what practices do you need to put into place, right? Find out what is the number that you should be honestly claiming on your W-4s if you're paid as an employee, right? Because some of us are writing 5 and 6 on those forms because we want to get back more money, but then we're feeling the pain at the end of the year because we owe, right? It's also important, guys, that in terms of the practical things we need to do, that you have to get really informed and clear about what the tax laws are. Now, I don't mean in all their nuances and intricacies. We don't all have to become experts on the tax law, but we do have to have awareness and clarity around the specific aspects of the tax law that directly impact us, right? And so many of you probably are aware that the tax laws significantly changed in 2018. And I know we have all kinds of artists who participate in these Abundance Bound calls, who are part of the Abundance Bound community. So it's going to be different for everyone. But for those of us specifically in the entertainment industry, the new tax laws led to a particular hit to our community, right? Because quickly, what we used to be able to do is that even though many of us in the entertainment industry are paid as employees, we used to be able to deduct our business-related expenses. So even though we were paid as employees, not as businesses, we still used to be able to deduct what expenses we had incurred getting those jobs, right? And the laws changed so that we are unable now to deduct any of the expenses against our W-2 earnings. Now, if there's anyone listening to this, right, or we'll have the recording posted for a little while, and I understand that for some of you, you really may not still have clarity around what those law changes are. And I have taught a couple of classes on it that have been recorded. So if you simply email, right, info@abundancebound.com, I am so happy to email you the videos and just some of the resources that we have pulled together that will help you understand how the tax laws have changed and how that may specifically impact you as an artist. Because this is the other part of moving from the pain cycle to the power cycle, right? It's clarity. And it's not just clarity around our own practices, right? And the information about our numbers. It's also clarity around the law. So that if you are someone who lost a lot of the deductions that you're used to taking, right? The emotion, again, is naturally and understandably going to be there, right? It is upsetting. We are all, or we should all be working and lobbying and writing letters and voting to try to get that law changed. But, right, the emotion can't drive. We have to have knowledge around how am I, each of you individually, being impacted by these law changes. What is that going to mean for you in terms of what you can expect to owe in taxes, so that we can adjust our behavior throughout the year, so that again, next year this time, we are able to celebrate the power with which we have shown up for this relationship without allowing fear and anxiety and stress and hopelessness and all of those things to take over. So I want to ask for any questions, any particular challenges, anything in these last sort of minutes that we're together that I can help with, right? That you feel like will help you throughout this year to make next year's tax time a celebration. I'm scrolling through. You don't have to type your question, guys. You could simply raise your hand, and then we'll test this out, whether I can allow you to talk. Hoping for some brave soul who has a question, who wants to raise their hand. Really? Come on, guys. Someone must have a question or even a comment. Ooh, I see a hand raised. All right, I'm gonna allow you to talk. Yes, I think that is Elena. But I can't hear you. Okay, hold on.
Hello?
Okay, yes, now we can hear you. What's your question?
Well, just a comment. I think this was just a great new way to think about the taxes of, again, getting into the power cycle.
Yeah.
It's out of the pain cycle.
Out of the pain cycle, right? Because we've existed there for a long time.
Right. And if we we know that tax season comes and we know that we have to do it. So if we're just proactive about it and just kind of make it habitual and be prepared, then we won't spiral into the pain cycle.
We won't spiral into the pain cycle. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
And the tip about knowing already what your tax bracket is, it's really about being proactive. If you're setting aside already enough, to take the taxes out. Because for me, I don't necessarily want a big return. I mean, my emotion around it was not ever necessarily having a big return. I just did not want to owe. I just did not want to owe the government. I didn't care if they gave it back to me. I just didn't want to owe them.
And thank you, because that's really important, guys. It's so interesting because that's another thing, right? And this is, again, the pain cycle. It's the celebration when we get a return, right? And it's all about that, and even though I understand you're like, how can that emotion be the pain cycle? Because again, when emotion is driving us, that is not the power cycle. So our goal actually should not be to get a huge return from the IRS. All that means is that we have essentially given them our money, right, interest-free, to use all year. Our goal really needs to be paying exactly what we should be, not more and not less. Because then you have had the ability to wisely and proactively use your money throughout the year, rather than letting the IRS use it to give it back to you in one big chunk. Thank you for that. I'm going to check and see here. I think this is another Elena who has a question. So Elena, I've unmuted you. What was your question or comment?
Well, my comment was I just recently was working on the VITA tax preparation program, doing people's taxes, actors, and other artists.
Bless you.
And I really noticed it didn't matter so much how much people had made or how much they had to pay or how much they were getting back. The biggest difference in terms of the people coming in and being calm and happier were the people that had prepared and they felt confident that they had their numbers and their documents kind of all arranged the way they wanted.
Right.
And then the other difference was, as we were doing it, for the people that did seem very stressed out about the whole thing, I took time to explain to them more information about how the new tax law worked and how they could prepare better for next year. And then that was like, even in an hour and a half with somebody, their emotions got much calmer just because they felt more empowered. And they actually would say that. Some people said they're going to sign up for your class. I mean, it was like people wanted to have more control and more knowledge about what was going on. And so I thought that those two things were it was just so clear what we talk about in our groups.
Right.
If, when people put it into practice, even in small doses,
yes,
you can see the effect on them.
Thank you, Elena. And yes, right. And so what you get to see And guys, for those of you who don't know what Elena was just talking about, there's a volunteer income tax assistance program that you have the ability to do the work and do the learning to be able to help people file their taxes at no cost. And I just really admire all of the people, thank you, who gave their time to do that. But so what Elena is sharing is that in the process of doing that, she gets to see the difference between people who are in the power cycle and people who are in the pain cycle. And, you know, someone, guys, here, and I'm just gonna mute you guys back again. Someone here wrote, I think this is John, wrote, the meditations and studies I've been doing suggest that you focus on what you do want as opposed to what you don't want. And I, John, think that is absolutely true, right? Except, I'm not saying that you're not saying this, I just want to offer some clarification in terms of what I mean. I don't believe that we can powerfully focus on what we do want unless we first get clear on what has been happening that we don't want, right? So I think that if I just be like, okay, tax time is going to be a celebration. Tax time is going to be a celebration. That's what I want. I want it to be a celebration, right? I don't believe that ends up being enough. Oh, you're saying you agree, but so thank you, because I just want to clarify this for everybody. I don't believe that ends up being enough. First, what I feel like we have to do is that we have to get clear on why isn't tax time a celebration, and then see what shifts we can make so that it becomes one for us, because then we can be super, super powerful about that. We have a question here regarding installment plans with the IRS, right? And in the time that she asked the question and I was answering other people's questions, she went to irs.gov and shared with us that you're able to find out the status of your account now and set up to pay in installments. And yes, guys, that's something I also want you to know, is that if you owe, right, again, we can set up installment plans with the IRS so that you can fit it into your financial forecast, right? You can fit it into your spending plan, and it doesn't have to be this one big painful hit. And then throughout this next year, we make the adjustments so that we're ready to pay the bill next year, or we pay it in pieces throughout the year. Yes, not wishing, but keeping the positive on what we want. Yes, a return as opposed to not owing. So thank you, Elena. So any last, I see it's telling me 2 hands raised. Oh, but I think you guys already asked your questions, so I'm going to lower all hands. Yes. Okay, perfect. So guys, that's our hour. And I don't know about you, but I've actually, this is fun. This has been different. I feel like this is what I want. I want these to be more interactive, and I'm learning as well, guys. So what I'm going to try and do is maybe next month, we'll see if I can just sort of share an idea in the first half to leave more time for questions and thoughts in the second half. Because I want for these to be interactive. I want this to be an opportunity for us to all share as a community again, that is committed to being abundance bound on how we can keep growing and learning together. So thank you, guys. Thanks for joining me today for this April Financial Friday. I hope you all have a wonderful month. I hope your assignments are clear. Sorry, I saw the question here from someone. that they'd like their partner to be able to see this video. So the way that the Financial Friday videos now work, guys, is they are live until, the video is available until the week prior to the next Financial Friday, because that's when we have to switch out the system so that the next topic and call is set up for us, okay? So you have about 3 weeks to watch this. Email me again at info@abundancebound.com if you would like any of the videos of some of the tax classes that I've taught that have more specifics about the tax law changes, and I've brought in guest experts that are on those videos, and I also share some great podcast episodes that deal with this topic. All right, have such a wonderful month, guys. I am about to go out into this cold, rainy New York weather. So for those of you who are still in warm, sunny Southern California, be grateful. Have a great month, guys, and I will talk to you very, very soon. Bye, everyone.